Welcome back to another episode of A World Gone Mad, Season 2, Episode 67. I'm your host, Jeff Allen Wolf. I have a lot to share with you this episode, so here we go. Elon Musk's private security detail gets deputized by U.S. Marshals Service. The U.S. Marshals Service has deputized members of Elon Musk's private security detail, giving them certain rights and protections of federal law enforcement agents. 3 law enforcement officials familiar with the matter told CNN. It was not immediately clear how many members of Musk's security team were made special deputies. Now, Musk, the tech billionaire and ally of President Donald Trump, and actually the president, right, is not eligible to have a U.S. Secret Service detail, meaning members of his personal security detail were limited in what they could do in Washington, D.C. Now that members have been deputized, they have more rights, could be authorized and actually are authorized to carry guns on federal grounds. It also means that if something went awry with the detail, the Marshals Service could be held legally liable, one law enforcement source said. Some people close to Trump's White House have been taken aback by the scale of security that has surrounded Musk since he became a regular presence in Trump's orbit last year. The detail is rivaled only by that of the president himself, the sources observed. So Elon not only has unlimited power now, but his security detail has guns. Freaking unbelievable, people. The DOGE, Donald Oligarchy Gestapo Enforcement Team, are carrying weapons. Nothing can go wrong with this scenario, right? Employees describe chaos, heightened emotions, and added security at IRS offices following firings. Following thousands of firings, Internal Revenue Service workers described chaotic scenes, heightened security, charged emotions playing out at tax agency locations across the country Thursday. CNN spoke with 4 IRS employees in Memphis, Atlanta, and Dallas, who are also warning of the potential for delayed tax refunds for Americans set to file their tax returns in the coming weeks. The employees who continue to work for the IRS spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution. Now, at the IRS campus in the Atlanta area, 2 IRS employees described a heightened security posture in and around the buildings. One of them said federal police officers and officers from the Department of Homeland Security are within and outside the agency's building. Employees are crying. Managers are crying. We are losing really good employees. It's very gloomy, and everyone is very angry, another employee said. But the employees CNN spoke to said it's not just the workforce that will be impacted. Americans awaiting and depending on their tax refunds could also feel the effects of the agency's mass firing in the middle of tax filing season. So a legitimate question to be asked. Do we have to pay taxes? I'm sort of being facetious here, but sort of not being facetious. If we don't pay our taxes, who's going to come after us? Oh, wait a minute. It could be Elon with his security team with the guns. But getting very serious. If we don't pay taxes and staff members in the thousands were laid off, who would enforce this and come after us? Donald is getting away with everything, and yet we are being nice about everything and following the rules. It's a very bizarre situation. So, Wolfpack listeners, dare I ask you a question? Only a few of you respond to these questions during each podcast. How do you feel about paying taxes? Have some of you felt deep down you shouldn't because of what's going on in Washington right now? Do you feel if you didn't pay taxes that you would be in serious trouble? So I hope some of you respond. I would appreciate that. My email, of course, is wolfpacklistener@gmail.com. Wolfpacklistener at Gmail. Or 24 hours, 7 days a week, the voice mailbox system, 833-399-9653. Leave a comment through the app you're using if it has that feature. Or on Blue Sky, say hello. Tell me you listen to the podcast and leave me a comment. I keep saying I'd like to hear from you, and only a handful of you are taking advantage of that. We have thousands more listeners versus the small handful that send me replies. And if you're on Apple or Spotify and you listen to my podcast that way, please rank the show 1 to 5 stars, leave a comment. That's how I get moved up in the rankings on there. GOP congressmen face criticism and several boos at a Georgia town hall. Now, a Republican congressman from Georgia faced some tough criticism and occasional boos from constituents Thursday night as he fielded questions about the Trump administration's early actions. The at times cool reception that greeted GOP Representative Rich McCormick in Roswell was among other public displays of unrest from Republican voters and a couple of GOP members of Congress this week, although the party's base has largely and vigorously supported President Donald Trump. At one point, McCormick, who represents the state's 7th congressional district, was pointedly asked about the firings of hundreds of federal workers at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is based in Atlanta. Why is a supposedly conservative party taking such a radical and extremist and sloppy approach to this, he was asked. Reply, I'm in close contact with the CDC. They have about, 13,000 employees? 13,000 employees at the CDC. In the last couple of years, those probationary people, which is about 10% of their employee base, about 1,300 people, which you're referring to, a lot of the work they do is duplicitous with AI, McCormick said. The mention of AI led to no's and murmurs from the crowd, leading the Republican representative to say, I happen to be a doctor, I know a few things. McCormick, who was first elected to Congress in 2022, also answered pointed questions about Trump's executive power and the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy as Health and Human Services Secretary. One constituent in the audience asked the following of McCormick. Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So the people would like to know what you, Mr. Congressman, and your fellow congressmen are doing to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House. This resulted in loud cheers and a standing ovation from several people in the room. So here's the two things I suggest you, the listeners, watch. I've mentioned this once before, or at least part of this equation once before. Let's watch how the courts statewide will rule in all of these illegal firings. Do they say it's okay? If it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. Number one. 2, how the Supreme Court will rule. And now we're seeing also, add a third one, how Republicans are getting upset at what's happening from Donald, the delusional one, and they're starting to turn on the Republican leadership. A slight glimmer of hope over the horizon? The judge vacates Eric Adams' corruption trial, but doesn't immediately dismiss charges. A federal judge has vacated the upcoming trial date for New York City Mayor Eric Adams, but declined to immediately dismiss the charges altogether in a case that has roiled the Justice Department. Judge Dale Ho, however, is appointing conservative attorney Paul Clement to present arguments challenging the Justice Department's decision to drop charges against Adams. The DOJ move to end the case against Adams has prompted an exodus of prosecutors who disagreed with the decision. 8 federal prosecutors, including the interim U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, have resigned in protest. 4 deputy mayors have departed City Hall as well. Adams, who consented in writing to the deal to drop the charges, has denied any quid pro quo with the Trump administration for dropping the charges of bribery, corruption, wire fraud, and soliciting and accepting donations from foreign nationals in exchange for boosting President Donald Trump's immigration agenda. Again, Donald getting involved in court cases he should have nothing to do with, and showing how he thinks he's above the law and does not need to go through proper channels. Target is getting hit from all sides on DEI. The store Target was sued Thursday by Florida and American First Legal for allegedly concealing the financial risks of its diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs and its 2023 Pride Month merchandise collection. The lawsuit was brought by Florida Attorney General James Othmeyer, a Republican, and America First Legal, a group started by White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller on behalf of a Florida board overseeing state pensions and other state investments. The lawsuit against Target is the latest conservative attack on companies' efforts to promote diversity and employee representation, customer marketing, and other areas. Now, the suit comes almost a month after Target scrapped some of its DEI policies, following pressure on the right and President Donald Trump's attempt to use the power of the federal government to roll back DEI in the private sector. But Target's retreat on DEI has provoked backlash and calls for boycott on the left, including from civil rights groups and the heirs to one of Target's founders. They want Target to stand up for diversity as a goal rooted in sound business practices, as the company has done for many years prior. Some companies have echoed the contention that DEI is good in business. And Coca-Cola said in annual filing this week that attracting a diverse employee base was critical to its continued growth and success, and it warned that failing to attract diverse top talent would hurt its business. The lawsuit shows that Target is essentially getting squeezed from both sides on DEI. The lawsuit also shows how much Donald and his supporters think about minorities and about diversity in the workplace. Zero. They don't want it in the workplace. They don't want it in the military. They don't want it in the government. Let's call it as it is, okay? It seems the Republicans and Donald Trump are bigots. I didn't say all Republicans. I said the supporters of Donald are bigots, and they're anti-women, anti-ethnicity, anti-immigrants. Even though, like I've said before, except for Native American Indians, everyone in America has immigrants in their family tree, including you, Republican leadership. The Pentagon hits pause on its plan to carry out mass firings of civilian employees, officials say. The Defense Department has temporarily paused their plan to carry out the firings of civilian probationary employees until Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon's Office of General Counsel can carry out a more thorough review of the impact such firings could have on U.S. military readiness, two defense officials familiar with the matter told CNN. The pause comes after CNN reported on Wednesday that mass terminations, which could affect over 50,000 civilian employees across the Pentagon, could run afoul of Title 10, Section 129A of the U.S. Code. Following that report, Pentagon lawyers began reviewing the legality of the planned terminations more closely, the officials said. Hegseth said in a video posted to X on Thursday that the department was focusing on terminating lower-performing employees first. But defense officials told CNN that the Office of Personnel Management is using a broad justification for the firings, arguing to DoD that these probationary employees don't contribute positively to the Pentagon's overall performance because they are no longer needed. U.S. consumer sentiment plunges over tariff and inflation fears. Inflation is picking up again, and President Donald Trump said this week it's all his predecessor's fault. But no matter who Trump blames for inflation, America's economic mood is now souring, and Trump is getting the heat for it. The University of Michigan's latest survey released Friday showed that U.S. consumer sentiment declined in February for the second consecutive month, according to a final reading, down by a steep 10% from January. That was double the decline initially reported earlier this month. It's a stunning about-face after American consumers and businesses grew hopeful briefly about the economy's future following Trump's election in November. The latest decline in consumer sentiment was driven by worries over Trump's tariffs potentially jacking up prices. Now, a new CNN poll released Thursday similarly showed that pessimism is on the rise because of prices. Nearly two-thirds of U.S. adults nationwide, 62%, said they feel Trump isn't doing enough to address inflation. The Michigan survey showed that Americans are now fearful of higher inflation on the horizon. On the campaign trail, remember, Trump promised to bring down prices starting on day one. Clearly, that didn't happen. Now it's January, or in January, consumer prices climbed at the fastest monthly pace since August 2023, increasing 0.5% from December. Joanne Su, the Michigan's survey director, said in a release that the broad decline was in large part due to fears that tariff-induced price increases are imminent. But changes in sentiment are beginning to diverge based on political affiliation. While sentiment fell for both Democrats and independents, it was unchanged for Republicans, reflecting continued disagreements on the consequences of new economic policy, she said. The Trump administration's aggressive approach to tariffs is a key reason why attitudes about the economy are souring. According to various consumer surveys and polls, so far the administration has implemented 10% across-the-board tariffs on all Chinese goods and announced 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports, with no exceptions. It's also studying how best to apply reciprocal tariffs on America's trading partners, which could come in early April. Trump is also keeping 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada on the table as soon as next month, a move that economists say would likely stoke inflation. And look, today, the Dow Jones at one point was down 750 points almost, based on the fears about tariffs and inflation. If Trump again moves to privatize Postal Service, here's what it'll mean for your deliveries. The Trump administration is considering steps that could give it more control over the independent U.S. Postal Service, according to multiple published reports. It's a move that could upend how Americans get critical deliveries, including online purchases, prescription drugs, checks, and vote-by-mail ballots. Let me emphasize the last one, vote-by-mail ballots. The Washington Post first reported late Thursday, citing numerous anonymous sources, that President Donald Trump planned to disband the U.S. Postal Service's Board of Governors and place the agency under direct control of the Commerce Department and Secretary Howard Lutnick. The Wall Street Journal also Friday reported on the plan to dissolve the commission, citing government officials. The Postal Service did not respond to any requests for comment from the press, but a White House official denied that Trump planned to sign such an order. This is not true. No such EO executive order is in the works, and Secretary Lutnick is not pushing for such an EO, a White House official told the press. However, the denial from the White House was silent on the question as to whether it is interested in privatizing the service, which is something that Trump has voiced support for in the past. The Post reported that the governing board is taking the threat of it being disbanded seriously, enough that it held an emergency meeting Thursday to retain outside counsel with instructions to sue the White House if the president were to remove members of the board or attempt to alter the agency's independent status. In December, then-President-elect Trump said privatizing the USPS is not the worst idea I've ever heard. It's an idea that a lot of people have liked for a long time, Trump said at a news conference at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. We're looking at it. Trump dropped previous plans to try to privatize the service in 2018 during his first term. The popularity and approval rate for the Postal Service is the reason efforts to privatize it failed during the first Trump administration, Renfro said. The people of this country, regardless of their political persuasion, love the Postal Service, he told CNN Friday. Regardless of which way they voted, what they did not vote for was the destruction of the Postal Service. Hey, how are anyone outside the United States reacting to Donald the Delusional and his actions? Well, singer Chantal Kreviazuk changes the lyrics of the Canadian anthem at a hockey game after Trump's 51st state remarks. Singer Chantal Kreviazuk, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, changed the lyrics of the Canadian national anthem during the Four Nations Face-Off Championship game between the U.S. and Canada on Thursday, adding further fuel to a contest already layered with political tension. She changed the line in "All of Us Command" to that "Only Us Command" in her pregame performance of "O Canada," later posting a photo of the altered lyric written on her hand on Instagram. Now, publicist Adam Gonshore told the Associated Press that the singer made the change to protest Donald Trump's comments about turning Canada into the 51st state of the U.S. Chantal, who is from Winnipeg, alluded to the friction between the two countries on Instagram, writing, "I am sorry if you think that we'd be better off annexed to the United States. Here's the thing. Art to me is an expression of our truth, and in this very peculiar and potentially consequential moment, I truly believe that we must stand up, use our voices, and try to protect ourselves. No, we should express our outrage in the face of any abuses of power. I was raised in part," she said, "by music that was inspired by brave voices committed to peaceful conflict resolution. Canada, not unlike Ukraine, is a sovereign nation, period. We have a culture individual to others. We are united in our values. We care. We're kind. We are strong," she added. Since the start of his presidency, Trump has repeatedly stated his desire to see Canada become the 51st state of the United States, aiming jabs at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and threatened massive tariffs that would have a devastating impact on Canada's economy. This has led to the Star-Spangled Banner being booed at hockey rinks in Canada in recent weeks, including on Saturday in Montreal before the first Four Nations face-off clash between the two teams. "O Canada" was booed briefly before Thursday's game in Boston, but it appeared as though much of the crowd was singing the Canadian anthem together by its conclusion. Thank you, Donald. Your hatred for everything and everyone is bringing all of us together, people that you wouldn't think would join forces. Come on, MAGA Republicans. Be on the right side of history. I will be back Monday night with another episode of A World Gone Mad. I'm your host, Jeff Allen Wolf, sitting in a room, talking to myself. Stay hopeful.